at all concerned about the fact that she was in an interracial marriage and that this was a difficult time in the South?
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff.
I want you to see the puzzle. When I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Your wife's best friend has been murdered, and police are looking at you. It's a chilly, drizzly winter Atlanta morning, and 35-year-old Lita McClinton is suddenly awakened.
It's around 8:15 in the morning, and she heard the doorbell ring. And she tightens up her rope and goes downstairs to open the door.
And I think she was probably not going to open it, but she looked through the keyhole and saw that the person had a box of flowers.
There was a man standing at the door, holding a long white box of long stem roses that had a big, thick pink ribbon around it.
So she receives the flowers, thinking that this is a delivery.
She was really excited. She thought that it was a gift from one of her friends.
In a sea of red brick townhouses, Lita's white one stands out. Her best friend Poppy and 3-year-old daughter have spent the night, and they are still in bed upstairs, just waking up.
Poppy hears her say, "Good morning," to the man at the door.
The flower delivery man produces a handgun. He fires a shot.
She actually put the box of roses in front of her face. The second shot went right through the center of her head, and she fell with a large thud.
Lita's friend Poppy was upstairs with her toddler. And right away, she grabbed her daughter and hid her into a closet and said, "You gotta be quiet, quiet as a mouse." She didn't know if the gunman was gonna come for her. Lita's neighbor hears the shots, then sees the guy running like a bat out of hell, just booking it out of the complex, and he calls 911.
The first police officer is only a few blocks away, and he gets the call, and so Lita's been shot. Lita's mother called her husband. When they went to the hospital, they were put in a separate...
Not murder. So when the shooting happened right here, neighbors were shocked and on edge.
Sullivan was found in the doorway of her townhouse, shot twice in the head.
It's pretty surprising that in this area, those kinds of things probably wouldn't happen.
How did you learn that Lita had been killed?
I ran to the TV because I heard Sullivan on Slayton Drive.
Police say a box of roses was found near her body. The gunman apparently posed as a delivery man.
And I said, oh my God, that's Lita.
Detectives on the scene found a bullet fragment, 2 shell casings, and the box of roses.
2 gunshots from a 9mm penetrated the box. The weapon was never found. To this day, it's never been found.
In this case, you had just a minor amount of evidence.
At the time, it was the top story on the news, and law enforcement officers felt a great deal of pressure in order to bring Lita's killer to justice.
For years, Lita's case was cold, buried underneath the weight of unanswered questions and fading memories.
I'm Deb Miller-Landau, and I just wrote a book called A Devil Went Down to Georgia about the murder of Lita McClinton Sullivan. I covered the story for Atlanta Magazine back in 2004, and the more people I talked to, the more that I researched, the more I felt like I began to know Lita. So talking about the day that she died feels personal.
The case was also personal to Clint Rucker, the prosecutor. When I came to Atlanta to meet up with him, I learned that one of his passions is puzzles, working from the outside in, which also translates to solving homicides. Where do you begin? How do you start to connect?
when I'm putting together a puzzle, not only in real life, but also a murder case, I make an assessment about what it is I'm working with. I start to identify pieces of the puzzle that are foundational.
Lita's murder case looks like a true crime story, but it goes a lot deeper. It's a story about love and loss and greed.
Lita had been reared in Atlanta's Black Elite.
You know, on the surface, she was living an Atlanta dream.
A prosperous upbringing.
A very prosperous upbringing. The expectations for her life were pretty high.
Black women have had to be exceptional in order to be seen. And that was the case then, and I think it's still the case now.
One thing seems certain, a murder of this kind is personal.
Was there a feeling that this had to be pretty calculated?
Police knew almost immediately Lita Sullivan was the intended victim.
Who would kill this woman? She wasn't robbed. Somebody came to the door with roses and shot her dead.
Atlanta had its fair share of crime, but this was most certainly one of the highest profile cases that got reported in the news.
Sullivan was shot twice in the head. A box of roses found next to her body.
Using a flower delivery man and shooting her, it was something that just kind of stuck out to me.
Atlanta, Georgia, billed as a vibrant melting pot, a destination for creatives. But if you grew up in Georgia in the 1970s, as I did, you know this was a very different place then. One still emerging from the dark shadows of segregation and racial tensions. What was 1970s Atlanta like when she was sort of coming along?
We've got African Americans that are kind of ascending into really prominent positions. Lita also is ascending because her parents are part of this movement.
Lita's parents, Emory and Joanne McClinton, were both power players, movers and shakers in Atlanta.
Emory McClinton was on the State Board of Transportation. Joanne McClinton was a member of the Georgia legislature.
Joanne will tell you stories about being in really interpersonal meetings with Dr. King.
She was the Maynard Jackson's campaign manager when he ran for mayor.
I think the McClintons had high expectations for who Lita would become. Lita Sullivan was a true daughter of Atlanta.
She was just a gem, very, very proper.
And she had grown up in a world of cotillions, so she really was sort of that classic upper crust black person growing up in Atlanta.
She knew where she was going.
She had a great sense of style.
And absolutely charming.
After high school, she went on to Spelman College. Her parents sort of hoped that she would enter the political arena like they were, but she was very much into fashion. She was working at a boutique at Lenox Square, and in walks this guy who had unruly curls and weird glasses and just immediately saw Lita and was taken with her.
Fresh out of college, 24-year-old Lita is smitten with James, Jim Sullivan. He's a bit older, 35, and he's also white.
He showered her with gifts. He just completely showered her with attention.
He comes in, he dazzles her. What did you learn about him?
I learned that what he saw was a fantasy in Lita. I think he looked at her as a young, very attractive, very smart African-American female.
Another big difference between them is class. Lita has been raised in Atlanta's high society and Jim on Boston's gritty South Side.
He grew up in a very middle to lower middle class environment.
He went to Holy Cross College, got a bachelor's degree in economics.
He always wanted more for himself. He always wanted to be a rich person. but it didn't seem like that was in the cards. He was an accountant. He was working hard, but he really wasn't getting ahead.
But life is about to change for Jim Sullivan when he inherits a thriving liquor distributorship from his uncle, worth millions of dollars.
Crown Beverages was worth around $3.2 million. Jim had become a wealthy man. So when the McClintons met Jim for the first time, they were like, who is this guy? He had this kind of manner that was very uncouth and brash, and they were sort of mystified about what their daughter saw in him. I mean, I think the only thing they had in common was that he was Catholic and they were Catholic as well. But everything else was complete polar opposites.
Another concern, of course, was race. Remember, this is the 70s. Even though the country is watching color barriers slipping away on the hit show The Jeffersons, with Primetime's first interracial couple.
Your parents have never gotten over the fact that I'm white.
That's because you never got over being white.
At that time, this was unusual.
Georgia's anti-miscegenation laws that forbade blacks and whites to marry had only been repealed 10 years earlier.
Still, despite their obvious differences, Jim Sullivan pops the question to Lita.
So the McClintons were like, you cannot marry this man.
They felt like Lita was really making a mistake and was kind of caught up in the exuberance of this relationship.
Despite her parents' strong objections, Lita and Jim are engaged. But on the eve of her wedding, Jim drops a bomb.
He tells Lita that he has been married before and that he has 4 children. Lita was shocked.
And then, the very same night, Jim Sullivan blindsides his bride-to-be again.
He whips out a piece of paper and he says, can you sign this? And then she looks down and sees that he's drawn up a prenuptial agreement. And she's like, what is this?
Apparently determined to protect his newfound wealth, Sullivan surprises Lita with a prenup, which says that in the event of a divorce, she would walk away with virtually nothing. She's reluctant, but the cake is ordered, the flowers are ready, so Lita signs the agreement and ties the knot anyway.
Lita got married in 1976. It was a small ceremony in Macon, Georgia. Joanne McClinton would later describe that as the worst day of her life.
The newlyweds settle some 80 miles south of Atlanta near Jim's business in Macon. It's a world away from Atlanta. But Lita agrees to give up her current job and her income and become full-time Mrs. Jim Sullivan.
They bought a house in Shirley Hills, a very affluent, very white part of Macon. Joanne and Emery McClinton feared for their daughter. Being part of an interracial couple in Macon, Georgia in the 1970s would have been extraordinarily challenging. The neighbors were like, you have the gall to bring a black wife to Shirley Hills. People threw garbage on their doorstep.
The out-and-out racism had to be tough for Lita. But she moves forward and makes some new connections and friends, including Yvette Miller.
When Lita and Yvette occasionally go out to eat, she notices something a bit curious.
We'd go out to lunch at a nice restaurant, and she couldn't pay the bill. And I would end up picking up the check.
And they were a wealthy couple.
They were very wealthy.
Then one Christmas season, a card arrives in the mail addressed to Jim. Lita opens it, and what she discovers will make her question everything. Lita and Jim Sullivan's first few months of marriage seemed to be going well.
They were both intelligent, both attractive, definitely upper class, high society.
But just beneath the surface, there's some obvious cracks.
They seemed to be loving at first.
At first.
He was not that nice to her, and he was not that kind to her.
Was he brusque? Was he brash?
He was a bit arrogant. Even though he had all of these resources, he did not, in my opinion, take care of his wife.
Friends say that the once generous millionaire has suddenly become a miser.
He was notoriously cheap.
He would wear his dead uncle's clothes around the house. He would use the sheath from the dry cleaning as saran wrap in the kitchen. He didn't want Lita to work, but he kept her on a very tight allowance where he gave her $150 a week.
Did she express any discontentment with her marriage?
When we were at those restaurants, Jim just does not give me enough money to take care of me and the house. You know, she clearly was not happy.
Was there talk of infidelity?
Lita had several instances where she questioned whether or not her husband was actually having an affair.
One day she finds a long blonde hair in their master bathroom, and she asks Jim about it, and he says, "I don't know what you're talking about." They got into this cycle of, she accused him of philandering. He would deny it, and then he would buy her sort of an expensive jewelry apology.
Then, during the holidays one year, Lita makes another stunning discovery.
A Christmas card came addressed to Jim. She opened it. A woman wrote in something like, "Missing your kisses." The woman's return address was on the envelope, so Lita went and spoke to her. And the woman said that she had been having an affair with Jim.
Lita is distraught and goes home to be with her parents in Atlanta. But her husband manages to lure her back, increasing her weekly allowance in a now post-nuptial agreement.
Now it's $300 instead of $150 a week, but it still shows that all of their assets belong to Jim.
That's right, the successful business, Lita's Mercedes, multiple properties, even her jewelry, still belong to her husband in the event of a divorce.
But in an attempt at reconciliation, Lita signs the postnup.
Just a few months after Lita signs that agreement, without Lita knowing, Sullivan decides to sell Crown Beverages for $5 million.
And that's not all. He tells her they're moving to Palm Beach, Florida.
Lita was in shock.
She had any clue that he was going to whistle her down to Palm Beach.
But Lita's new Florida home, located a stone's throw from what would become Mar-a-Lago, is more elaborate than she ever would have imagined. Called Casa Alita, it's a 17,000 square foot mansion with 8 oceanfront bedrooms.
It was just unbelievable.
When you went to Jim's home, you go through this tunnel and you would be at the beach. It's your own private beach.
But for Lita, everything that glitters isn't exactly gold.
James Sullivan very much wanted to integrate himself into the upper echelons of society, and his aspirations did not include Lita's participation.
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live. And when he found out that to sort of scale the level of social plateau he was looking at in Palm Beach, having a black wife was a serious impediment to that.
She was left out of some affairs, and she really became upset.
So even though they had money, this is a moneyed crowd, didn't really matter though.
He was barely rich compared to Palm Beach.
Did he want to be in that crowd?
Oh yes, he wanted to, be accepted as one of the rich and famous.
It doesn't take long before Jim starts to flirt with other women.
And it's at a cocktail party that one particularly elegant Palm Beach woman catches Sullivan's eye.
Jim sees Suki Rogers, who is a Korean-born socialite.
She was telegenic. She had a spicy personality. I think a man like Jim Sullivan could not help but be intrigued by this beautiful woman.
They started dating. He's still married to Lita.
By now, the Sullivans have been married nearly 10 years. But things are about to explode.
Lita finds women's lingerie in their master bed. It's the bra that broke the camel's back.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff and I'm going back home.
Lita arrives back in Atlanta. The very next day, she files for divorce from Jim.
But Sullivan fights Lita every step of the way, and the divorce drags on.
Did she seem concerned, worried, nervous about her breakup?
What I detected was she was excited and she was cutting the cord and leaving Jim alone. She wanted her life back.
While Lita is looking forward to a new life of freedom, she can't be happy about the prospect of leaving her marriage with virtually nothing. No career, no Palm Beach mansion, no Buckhead townhouse, and $2,500 a month in alimony for 3 years. So Lita is going to divorce court, determined to fight for what she believes she deserves.
All she wanted was a reasonable financial settlement so that she could kind of go on with her life.
January 16th, 1987 was set up to be a pivotal day in the lives of Lita and Jim Sullivan.
A judge was going to decide whether or not to throw out the postnuptial agreement.
She might get as much as close to $1 million in cash and assets.
The morning of January 16th, Lita Sullivan, she'd lose her life that day in a murder.
With Lita out of the picture, Jim Sullivan stands to gain the property that they had and retain control over all his money.
Sullivan was the main suspect.
That is, until a treasure trove of secret recordings of Lita's private conversations are uncovered, taking this investigation in a whole new direction.
And police are looking at you.
You know, you make a big circle and you put everybody in it that's close to Lita. Everybody's a suspect. But the first one would be the husband.
The first and obvious suspect was James Sullivan, who stood to gain everything from her death, all the property, all the monies, and who was contesting the divorce.
Detectives went down to speak to him in Palm Beach, and they put him through a polygraph.
Jim Sullivan not only passes the polygraph, but there's something else. He has an alibi that puts him nearly 700 miles away from the crime scene.
James Sullivan was actually in Palm Beach at the time of Lita's murder.
When you first look at it, it looks pretty cut and dry. When you interview all the people involved, everybody points in one direction, towards the husband. But when you sit down and look at the facts, I'm not so sure that the husband is the person that committed the crime.
Nothing surfaced in the early stages of the investigation that implicated Jim Sullivan in the murder.
Sullivan is cooperating with authorities, and during his interview with detectives, he mentions the name of his friend, Marvin Marable.
At the time of Lita's death, Marvin and James Sullivan had a very close relationship.
Remember, Marvin Marable is married to Lita's best friend, Poppy, who was in the Buckhead townhouse with her 3-year-old daughter the morning that Lita was murdered. But back before the shooting, the friendship hadn't always sat well with Marvin.
When Lita moved back to Atlanta, they started, hanging out together.
So she's disillusioned by her relationship. Did her failed relationship have any impact on your relationship?
Well, from the standpoint of them, being together all the time and going out, yeah.
Commiserating.
Oh, absolutely. Certainly didn't help. And I can understand her being there for her friend, but, sometimes you can go overboard, which is what happened in our relationship.
Marable, a former New York State trooper turned entrepreneur, says Lita would often spend hours at his home with Poppy. And it was during this time, he says, coincidentally or not, that his own marriage began to unravel.
I found a letter where Poppy was planning to file for divorce.
So she was planning to file for divorce without your knowledge?
Oh, yeah.
That had to be a shocker.
It was.
So then you decided to try something a little questionable after that.
You know, I have a background in law enforcement. I don't see it as questionable. It's your own telephone in your own house. I put a recorder on the, people call it a tap, on the phone, and I started recording conversations.
In the house phone?
Mm-hmm. On the house phone.
He began listening to Poppy and Lita's conversations and ended up recording more than 300 hours.
And during those very personal conversations between girlfriends, Marvin Marable learns that there may be some information that James Sullivan might be interested in learning that will be helpful for him in his divorce case.
He tells Sullivan about the tapes and what's on them, specifically Lita's post-divorce plans.
And soon enough, the two disgruntled husbands are conspiring to get the best of their soon-to-be ex-wives in divorce court.
Marvin Marable travels down to Palm Beach under a false name, and the two men listen to the tapes, and Marvin says, "I'm not going to record anymore," and Jim says, no, keep recording.
Was there talk of money?
Yeah, he offered $30,000.
Jim says to Marvin, if the judge decides to honor the postnuptial agreement, he's going to give Marvin $30,000 for the use of the information on the tapes.
What kinds of things did Lita talk about that could be helpful to either one of you?
You know, there were some guys that, she would talk to, but she was legally separated.
But then, just a few days after Marvin and Jim's secret meeting at Casa Elita,
Poppy and Lita somehow discovered the recording device.
How did they react?
It wasn't nice. She filed for divorce the next day.
She was angry.
She was very angry.
Lita was upset too, so upset that she reported Marvin to the authorities, and he was charged with possession of an eavesdropping device. So when police questioned Sullivan about who might have a motive to murder his wife, he tells them to look no further than Marvin Marable.
And sure enough, only a few days after Lita's death, Marvin is being questioned by the Atlanta Police Department about Lita's murder.
I go down for the interview, and the first thing they did is read me my rights. And from there on, it was just a nightmare. I was a prime suspect.
You have a law enforcement background, so you knew what police were.
So I knew that I was being followed. I could pick the investigators, police, could pick them out all the time. Jim had mentioned my name to them. He said, look at Marvin Marable.
This was serious stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How worried were you?
I was very worried.
Joanne and Emery McClinton were beyond devastated. Their eldest daughter was dead. Just 3 days after Lita's murder, they held a funeral.
Days dissolve into months, and authorities are no closer to finding Lita Sullivan's murderer.
The case is just sort of growing colder and colder by the minute.
And while Marvin Marable might have been angry at Lita for pressing those charges against him for eavesdropping, there was no evidence he was responsible for her death.
I know that people get wrongly accused, wrongly convicted, and so the only saving grace is the fact that I knew I was innocent.
By process of elimination is you can determine the pieces that don't fit.
And just eliminate them.
The way in which we eliminated Marvin Marable as a suspect. There was just not enough to connect him directly to the crime itself.
As for that eavesdropping device charge, Marvin was put on probation, which he completed, and then he was exonerated. But on those recordings Marable made, Lita had talked about other men, something that her soon-to-be ex-husband Sullivan pointed out to police.
He made allegations that she was participating in extramarital affairs, and that perhaps this was the action of, you know, a disgruntled boyfriend.
We have a lot of major players. At this point in the investigation, we have a lot of suspects.
One of the first men police question is a professional athlete.
Lita and him had been friends when she was in Palm Beach. The police quickly found out that he was in prison for drug possession.
That athlete is behind bars when Lita is killed, so clearly he can't be the trigger man. Then investigators turn their sights to a prominent Atlanta businessman.
And he and Lita had been childhood friends, and they sort of rekindled their friendship. And they realized that he had no motive, and they found nothing that connected him.
Authorities also take a hard look at another suitor who had taken Lita to dinner the night before her death. And get this, had also given her 2 roses.
The suspect was a man named Bob Daniel, and Bob had had an incident a couple months before the murder where, in a drunken rage, he came to Lita's house, smashed his car into the garage, and as the cops were taking him away, he said, "I'm gonna kill that." So, serious red flag.
But that lead didn't go anywhere either.
Bob had just had quadruple bypass surgery. You know, the police ultimately decided that Bob had nothing to do with it.
It's the unknowing that makes it so difficult. And to know that there are individuals who may be walking around now planning and plotting to do the same thing to somebody else is abhorrent to me.
I remember having the impression it was like a festering wound for them.
The McClintons want to draw attention to a $25,000 reward in the case.
The cause of finding justice for Lita became their obsession, became their passion.
The reward is for the arrest and conviction of those individuals responsible for our daughter's murder.
To catch Lita's killer, the Atlanta Police Department assigns 2 veteran detectives to the case.
If Lieutenant Walker bears a resemblance to actor Billy D. Williams, Welcome Harris reminds one of Columbo, the dogged, disheveled detective of television fame.
Building a murder case was like making a mosaic. You know, you get a shiny piece of glass here, a gem there. You put it together and you hope that from it emerges the shimmering image of a killer.
This particular case deals with what I consider to be high society. It contains a little bit of everything. Intrigue, mystery.
These days, a lot of murders are solved using DNA technology, ring camera technology. But back then, it was detective work.
She was shot with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
Most important thing found at the crime scene was the roses.
They canvassed all the area flower shops and quickly found that the roses had been purchased at the Botany Bay flower shop.
They interviewed the worker in there, and he told them that this guy came in about 8 o'clock and bought these roses and paid in cash and then left. And he was in a small car.
The florist gave a description of the man buying the flowers and another man who was waiting in the car.
So detectives know they're looking for at least 2 men.
Until yet another person is described to police, that flower delivery man who had looked Lita's neighbor right in the eye.
There was a next-door neighbor of Lita's, lived over on the right side of her condo. He lived there. His name was Bob Christensen.
He actually gave a description of the flower delivery man as a Caucasian, middle-aged man.
They went down to the police station and worked with a police artist and got sketches. As the sketches were being completed, the officers were realizing, obviously, that the shooter was not Jim Sullivan and that the other individuals were all 3 distinct individuals. They didn't look anything like each other, so therefore we knew 3 people were involved.
For investigators, this has all the earmarks of only one thing: murder for hire.
All the evidence pointed to a hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, and firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
With investigators now exploring the possibility that Lita was murdered by a hired gunman, another critical piece of evidence comes to light: a mysterious phone call.
And what they found was that on the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call that was placed from a payphone right outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Was this a call from the killer?
I don't know about you, I haven't had a collect call from a payphone, so as a cop you probably go, I wonder if that's connected.
And a tip from a woman 700 miles away may just be the big break investigators have been waiting for.
I said, anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
A hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
You figure out what fits and what doesn't fit.
I want everyone listening to this to know that I am absolutely innocent.
The loss of a daughter.
They still don't have the murder weapon.
But they do have witnesses.
Do you know anybody that can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
Anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers.
You actually brought in a doorbell. Why?
To have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder. She's about to meet her maker.
It's a deadly delivery of a dozen pink roses. 35-year-old Lita McClinton Sullivan opens her front door and is suddenly gunned down.
On the year anniversary of Lita's death, there are no named suspects. They still don't have the murder weapon. They don't have a hitman. They don't have a paper trail that ties Jim or anyone else to a hit.
But that's about to change when they get Jim Sullivan's phone records.
On the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour or so after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call to James Sullivan's home in Palm Beach, Florida.
It turns out to be from a rest stop in Suwanee, Georgia, maybe 30 or 40 miles from Buckhead. Using a phone call to call another state, that opens up federal jurisdiction. In this case, that's the FBI.
We believed the phone call from Suwanee rest stop to his home in Palm Beach, Florida, was sufficient indication that a contract hitter may have called him after doing the job.
Enter Special Agent John Kingston, who takes a particular interest in that phone call and a whole slew of other calls Jim Sullivan made and received around the time of Lita's murder.
I got a whole year's worth, 6 months before the murder to 6 months after the murder.
Kingston notices a few calls, and one of them was to Bob Christensen, Lita's neighbor. When Kingston talks to Bob, he finds out that Jim had called Bob 3 days before the murder.
Sullivan said, had he seen anything suspicious around Lita's townhouse?
And Bob finds it strange. He hasn't talked to Jim in over a year.
Bob Christensen shares something else with Agent Kingston. On the same day Jim Sullivan called him, 3 days before the fatal flower delivery, Lita heard a loud knock on her door at 5 or 6 in the morning. It was so early and so unnerving, she didn't answer it.
So that made the call that he got from Jim even more suspicious.
Kingston also finds that a call is made between Jim's house and a Howard Johnson's motel in Atlanta, just a couple of miles from Lita's house. This is really strange. One thing that he's learned about Jim is that he's not a Hojo's kind of guy. So he goes to the Howard Johnsons and asks if he can look through the records.
They gave me the shoebox with all the registration cards, and I pick out 3 that I thought, well, these are awfully interesting. So I say, do you guys have the phone records? They said, yeah, sure we do. And I'm thinking, boy, these people keep really good records, and they keep them for a long time, and I'm really glad. They bring me the phone records for January 13th, and I'm flipping through them, and all of a sudden I see 305 Palm Beach, South Florida area code, and I'm pretty sure it's Jim's number. And so I check my records real quick, and I go, yep, that's his number. And then I look, and I said, oh, look, it's from 518. That's one of the 3 cards I pulled out. Well, it just so happens I have a copy of it here. And one of the things that imparts is 3 individuals checked into the room. The individual who actually registered used the name Johnny Furr, but 3 individuals is important to me because I think 3 people involved in the crime. They put their car down as a Toyota 85 with a North Carolina plate. We believe that a Toyota was the getaway car for the murder. So there's 2 coincidences already.
But remember, these motel records are from January 13th. Lita was murdered 3 days later on the 16th. Special Agent Kingston is beginning to surmise that the killers may have tried and failed to get to her once before.
What I believe it to be is the killers having come down 3 days before the actual murder was committed, knocking on her door, her not answering it, and them having to stop and regroup and figure out what plan B is going to be. So I am in love with this registration card and becomes the focal point of my life for the next several months.
Kingston's next move is to locate this so-called Johnny Furr with the North Carolina license plate.
And to my surprise, there are 150 John or Johnny Furrs in North Carolina. But to my great surprise, 115 of these 150 are in a very small circle in North Carolina between the 3 cities of Albemarle, Concord, and Kannapolis.
They're going to knock on every door and find this Johnny Furr. Of course, they're coming from Georgia, and anytime the FBI goes and investigates in another state, they need that state's approval. And just as they're about to get to the state border, their boss calls them and says, North Carolina's denying you entry, and they'll take it from here.
And that pretty much kills my case. that kills my case.
Yeah, soon after that, Agent Kingston is transferred to another job, and that whole investigation just sort of fades away. Meantime, in Palm Beach, Jim and Suki are living the high life. So with Lita out of the picture, Jim is free to marry Suki, which he does 8 months after Lita's murder.
He's thinking that he's the cat's meow. Eating in restaurants in Palm Beach, going to parties, got another attractive woman on his arm.
Jim drives around town in a Rolls Royce and gets into a fender bender and has to go to traffic court. Jim says to the judge, well, you've misunderstood. I wasn't even driving that day. Suki was driving. So the judge says, we're going to throw it out. However, the cop who was on the scene catches wind, and he says Suki wasn't even in the car that day. It was Jim driving alone. So now Jim has perjured himself, as has Suki.
Jim ultimately got convicted of perjury, was given a year probation and a year of home confinement.
Suki Sullivan also receives a year of probation.
Suki's freaking out. When she gets charged with perjury on his behalf, she's like, I'm done with this. Suki files for divorce from Jim. And the trial that follows is the juiciest, craziest gossip in town. So when it's Suki's turn to testify, she drops a bomb.
Did he talk to you about his former wife, Lita? Yes.
Tell me what it was he said to you about leaving.
You can hear a pin drop. It's a big moment. After 33 months of marriage, Suki files for divorce from Jim.
Not surprisingly, it's another disputed divorce. But what might have been typical testimony about alimony takes a sudden turn in court.
Tell me what it was he said to you about leaving.
He hired someone to better for her.
I'm sorry?
He hired someone to better for her.
She claimed that he confessed to her that he had Lita killed.
This became a bombshell in the investigation of the murder of Lita Sullivan.
Suki Sullivan's divorce testimony may be big news for the FBI, but it has zero impact on the divorce judgment, which favors her husband, Jim Sullivan, in nearly every way.
His divorce was complete, but his life for turmoil was just beginning.
The opulent ocean-facing Palm Beach Palace may look like something out of The Great Gatsby, but while we watched, a new chapter in a crime story was unfolding.
We develop information here at WSB. There's going to be a raid on Jim Sullivan's Palm Beach mansion, and that is the biggest break in the Lita Sullivan case since the murder itself.
Investigators from the FBI, Atlanta Police, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation were on the grounds of a mansion identified as that of James Sullivan.
All of a sudden, Jim Sullivan is clearly in the crosshairs of federal authorities.
They got a tip that Jim, now a convicted felon, has guns in the house. Of course, you're not allowed to have guns if you're a convicted felon. So they put together a sweeping affidavit to get a search warrant.
We did see a number of guns loaded into a car and this box carried out.
When they found the guns, he was in violation of his probation, and so he went to jail for 9 months.
All this time, a federal grand jury has been convening in Atlanta.
They've got what they found in the mansion. They got what they found in the phone records. They've got Suki Sullivan. They've got the neighbors. What they don't have are the identities of the hit team. There's a problem, though.
We, under the federal government, have a 5-year statute of limitations, which is going to be up on January 16th of '92.
With 5 or 6 days to go before it expired, the U.S. attorney made a bold decision. We're going to take our best shot with what we got right now, so they indict Jim Sullivan.
Jim Sullivan is indicted on multiple counts of arranging Lita's murder for hire through interstate phone calls.
Millionaire James V. Sullivan is on trial in connection with an alleged murder for hire plot. Here he arrives for the first day of trial testimony.
It was a trial that transfixed Atlanta. I mean, it was something we were covering on basically a daily basis, but we couldn't have it on camera because it's federal court.
It looks like the family is finally going to have some accountability for the murder of their daughter, Lita.
The prosecution suggests the killers were calling Sullivan from the rest stop to say the job was done. The defense suggests otherwise.
Jim Sullivan is lawyered up with the best criminal defense lawyers that you can find anywhere in Atlanta and maybe in the whole country.
There is no evidence at this point in this case who placed that call or whether that call was placed by anyone connected with the crime.
The prosecutor spent 2 weeks telling their side of the story.
Suki, the woman he married months after Lita's death, delivered some of the most dramatic testimony the jury has heard.
They build what they feel like is a really strong case.
And then a big bombshell hits.
The judge says, I'm forced to dismiss this case for lack of evidence.
Judge Marvin Shube ruled that, in effect, even if Sullivan may have been involved in the murder for hire, the government fell short in proving the phone calls related to the murder.
This is one of the most difficult decisions I had to make because I firmly believe in the jury system.
And then he looks at Jim and he says, you've been acquitted.
Is over.
The family at that point, I guess, is just sort of at a loss. How devastating was that for them?
They felt like the justice system had let them down. I was not expecting this. It's extremely difficult.
The system today is weighed in the favor of the defense.
James Sullivan seems to have gotten away with murder.
But Lita's parents aren't giving up.
They file a wrongful death suit in Palm Beach, Florida, and they win.
We, the jury, return the following verdict.
The jury deems that Jim is guilty of wrongful death.
Total damages of the estate of Lita McClinton Sullivan, $4 million.
But Sullivan is able to hide his assets and not pay any of the civil judgment.
Jim Sullivan appealed their civil judgment, and he won by having the Florida court say that they had filed it after the Florida statute of limitations.
Once again, Jim has wiggled out of any responsibility, and the family is left dumbfounded.
Until
a call is received out of the blue.
A young woman comes forward. It proved to be the break in the case that everyone was looking for.
"11 years have gone by since Lita Sullivan was gunned down on her doorstep when a tip comes in from a town 700 miles away.
A call is received out of the blue, and the individual calling is an attorney in Beaumont, Texas. He has a receptionist whose name is Belinda Trahan, who has told him a very unusual story about her boyfriend, Tony Harwood.
Belinda and Tony lived together in Albemarle, North Carolina. And he was a long-distance truck driver for North American Van Lines.
He basically drove a moving truck.
Belinda tells her boss about a time that Tony came home from a long-haul trucking trip and said that a rich white man in Florida offered to pay him to, quote, take care of his black wife in Georgia. At the time, Belinda didn't believe it. She thought he must be cheating on her.
Belinda thought that it was Tony just trying to get out of town and go down to Atlanta to the strip bars.
Until he took her to meet this rich white guy in a diner somewhere, and he got a wad full of money.
She says he sits down briefly in their booth and gives Tony Harwood the balance owed for the hit on the man's wife.
Belinda Trahan tells her boss that soon after this bizarre trip, she broke up with Tony Harwood and moved to Texas. But now, 11 years later, she says that he mysteriously reached out to her again, asking her to meet him at a nearby truck stop.
She's afraid that he may commit harm to her.
And it's this new tip from Belinda Trahan that sends Georgia authorities to the Lone Star State, turning up the heat on an otherwise cold case.
Georgia Bureau of Investigator Agent John Lang takes a detective from the Atlanta Police Department and goes down to Texas to talk to Belinda.
She was with Tony when they met this mysterious man at this diner that they were meeting at. We wanted to show her a lineup of pictures in hopes that she could pick Sullivan out of it.
And she takes her pink fingernail and taps right on Jim Sullivan's face and says, "This is the man."
My plan of attack was to get some recordings with her and Tony. So we got her to get in touch with Tony again.
She's talking to him and trying to coax information out of him, knowing John Lang is listening on her end. And Tony gives enough information that places him at the scene at the time.
We had the phone calls with Tony. She picked Jim Sullivan out of the lineup, but there was still more investigation to do. We really didn't know who Tony Harwood was.
John Lang knows that Tony worked at North American Van Lines. So he calls up North American Van Lines and he says, hey, you don't happen to have your records from 11 years ago? And the guy says, yeah, there's some boxes full of files up in a musty attic. You're more than welcome to go poke around.
We went up into a hot attic and opened the first box that I went through. And about the third document I looked at was Jim Sullivan. His address was on it, Palm Beach, Florida. His signature was on it, and Tony Harwood's signature was on it.
He finds a bill of lading showing that Tony Harwood moved furniture for Jim Sullivan 2 months before the murder. And it's the paper trail he needs. It's like the jackpot.
Astounding. I don't know any other way to explain it. I mean, open this box and like the third record I look at, here it is. I mean, it just like it was meant to be.
On a Sunday morning in April of 1998, John Lang and local authorities go knock on Tony's door in Albemarle, North Carolina. Tony answers the door.
And he said, you know, I've been waiting on you boys for a long time.
They take Tony to the Albemarle police station. Lang interviews Tony for 3 hours in this tiny room. But at the end of the day, Tony admits to taking money from Jim, $25,000, to take care of Lita. He also tells the detectives that he wasn't the one to pull the trigger, but that he was there the day of the murder.
He went through the whole case, and throughout the interview, he incriminated himself even more. I mean, admitted that he was there. He knew what happened. So he was arrested for murder of Lita Sullivan, and we took him back to Atlanta that day.
After Tony's arrest, things moved pretty quickly.
We are here today to announce the issuance of a warrant for the arrest of James V. Sullivan.
They got enough to get Sullivan, and now boom. Sullivan hears of this and blows. He takes off.
We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
He's just gone, vanished.
Investigators say he could be anywhere.
He is nowhere to be found.
We certainly do not know where Mr. Sullivan is. We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
More than a decade after his wife Lita was murdered, Jim Sullivan seems to be playing a game of catch me if you can with authorities.
There is an international manhunt for James Sullivan.
Well, Jim had moved to Costa Rica, actually bought a home there. In 1998, after an arrest warrant was issued for him, he immediately, like that night, went to Panama.
If you have any information concerning James Sullivan, you should contact the nearest U.S. Embassy or consulate.
We didn't know exactly where he had flown from Panama, and we didn't know exactly where he had gone.
His trail goes cold.
They put him on Interpol, and it was just cold.
They've tapped phone lines, anybody that he might have called, and he's called no one, not even his mother.
There was a few tips that came in. The tips are just dead ends.
The McClintons, they're dumbfounded that this guy could, get away again.
But in late 1999, with Sullivan still completely off the grid, the heartbroken Emery and Joanne McClinton do get some good news.
Last week came this, a court decision reinstating a $4 million judgment against Jim Sullivan in connection with a wrongful death case brought in effect by Lita's estate.
Lita's family and law enforcement officials hope that a renewed hunt for Sullivan's money will help smoke him out.
Where you find Sullivan's money, you're going to find him close by.
But even this goes nowhere.
Fast forward to 2002. There is no sign of Jim Sullivan.
We tried every effort in our arsenal to try and locate him, to put him on the FBI's wanted list, but to also put him on the top 10 list, which is very unusual. You don't get on the top 10 list very easily. Then we also featured him on America's Most Wanted.
The most recent picture we have of Sullivan is at least 5 years old, so the FBI age-enhanced this photo, which may bear a closer resemblance to Sullivan's appearance today. If you recognize James Sullivan from either of these photographs, call us now at 1-800-CRIME-TV.
A man sees America's Most Wanted on television and goes, I know that guy. He lives in my condo complex in Chiang, Thailand. And sure enough, he calls the authorities.
He went to Panama, to Venezuela, and eventually to Thailand, where he got a beachfront condo.
He spends his days walking on the beach, sitting by the pool, occasionally playing tennis, as though no other troubles in the world. The Thai police knock on Jim Sullivan's door on July 2nd, 2002, and say, you're under arrest. The McClintons can hardly believe it.
Individuals behind us.
Almost as soon as Jim Sullivan is arrested for murder, Tony Harwood, who has continued to deny being the trigger man, agrees to a plea deal.
Tony kind of sees the writing on the wall.
Harwood just decided that he would plead guilty, the negotiated plea for manslaughter, and that, in turn, that he would testify against Jim Sullivan.
It took 2 years, but he finally was extradited back to Atlanta in 2004.
He got off the plane. He was wearing a single shoe because he had such terrible gout in his foot. But he gets off and gets taken to Fulton County Jail. And there's this sort of cumulative sigh of relief.
To be clear, Sullivan being tried for murder in Georgia is not double jeopardy. For one thing, it is a state case, and the previous one was a federal case, and that specifically was for arranging Lita's murder for hire over the phone.
The elected district attorney appoints me, along with a couple of other lawyers, to prosecute the case.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
Right.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
There's no cutting corners, and you spread the pieces out, and then you figure out what fits and what doesn't fit. And that's kind of what the prosecution of James Sullivan was like. It was putting together all these different pieces so that we could make sure that the prosecution of the case was done accurately and with integrity.
What concerned you going into this trial?
He was rich. He was a white male. He had escaped the federal authorities before, and he had two of the best criminal defense attorneys representing him.
They are sharp, and if they can find a way out, they're going to find a way out.
There will not be one shred of physical evidence that links Jim Sullivan to this crime.
Jim has eluded justice so many times that there's a real palpable fear that he's going to get away with it, that he's going to elude justice again.
After nearly 20 years, Jim Sullivan is finally on trial here in Fulton County for the murder of his wife, Lita. For her heartbroken parents, this day couldn't come soon enough.
The pain, believe it or not, it increases. It does not decrease. The shock decreases. The depression decreases. But the pain continues.
It was an A-team of prosecutors, great courtroom performers.
Clint Rucker was the lead prosecutor, and Anna Green, Kelly Hill, Sheila Ross.
And the evidence will show that the person who sent that hitman to Lita's door is the only person in the world who profited from her death. It is the only person in the world who met Tony Harwood and paid him off for killing her, and is the only person in the world who fled halfway around the world to avoid facing you.
Jury was 9 women and 3 men.
The jury is also racially mixed.
Jim Sullivan had Ed Garland and Don Samuel. Again, the people who won that big courtroom victory against the feds.
What the state relies on is two types of evidence. Circumstantial evidence, and then the testimony of con men.
The state initially started out the nature of the crime and what happened that morning.
I heard two sounds. They sounded to me like steel hitting steel.
I just didn't want to believe that it was a gun. And so I hesitated for a second, and then I really knew that it was a gun.
She was able to squeeze my hand each time I spoke with her, like she understood what I was saying. And for many, many years after this, I thought that's all it was. And then one day I realized that she was comforting me more than I was comforting her. That was the sort of lady I felt she was.
They had the phone calls that the FBI had found.
There was a call from this room to Mr. Sullivan's home at 7:44 in the morning.
But all this testimony notwithstanding, it's Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood who everybody wants to hear from.
Belinda Trahan was the most important witness in the case.
He told me that some white guy who wanted to take out his black wife. I didn't believe it.
Why not?
I've been with him for 3 years, over 3 years. I mean, I figured he met someone because we were on the outs.
Most chilling about Belinda's testimony is that she confirms that there was at least one failed attempt on Lita's life.
She testifies that when Tony had gone to Lita's house on January 13th, that she didn't come to the door. They drove back to North Carolina and told Belinda that, it didn't work.
But Belinda testifies that hearing that from her boyfriend left her incredulous.
I said, just don't even lie to me. I said, because anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
Did you in any way mean for that to be a suggestion as to how to get the job accomplished?
No, not at all.
Here's Belinda Trahan, and she is falling on the sword about what she did.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers, and she admitted that on the stand.
You brought in the diner booth where they sat. Why couldn't you just tell the jury and show pictures?
I want you to see the puzzle once it's all put together. Yeah, I can show you the box. I can show you a photograph of it. But when I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Push the paper across the table like this, and then Tony put his hand on it and took it from there.
And there was a particular moment when she is asked to stand up in court and identified the person she witnessed give Tony Harwood an envelope full of money.
Please, point him out.
It's right there. He can't even make eye contact.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, James Sullivan.
But if prosecutors feel like Belinda Trahan's testimony is helping their case, they have to know that it's just as big a risk to put Tony Harwood on the stand.
Can you show the jurors the body language Mr. Sullivan used and the tone of voice, if it's possible, that he used when he was explaining to you that his wife, Lita, was a problem?
You know, I've got this wife of mine up in Atlanta, and she is just trying to take everything I've got. And I don't know what to do about it. I need someone to take care of my problem. Do you know anybody who can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
We could prove Tony Harwood and James Sullivan actually met each other. So I spent the first part of Tony Harwood's examination confirming his signature on the hotel receipt.
And the signature, Johnny Kerr.
The fact that he actually went to the flower shop.
Who actually went inside the flower shop to purchase the flowers.
I did.
They had Tony Harwood saying that he was the one who made the collect call to Jim Sullivan's house.
What did you say to him?
I said, Merry Christmas. And he said, I understand. And that was it.
What were you trying to convey to Mr. Sullivan by giving him that signal, those code words?
That his problem was taken care of.
The defense had their chance to cross-examine Harwood. Not a single question. The two key witnesses were, of course, Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood. And so, in closing arguments, the defense assailed their credibility.
You should reject everything that came out of his mouth. Harwood says envelope in the bathroom. She says an envelope at this booth over here.
Garland presents to the jury a letter-sized envelope stuffed with bills. Harwood had said it was all cash in $20 bills.
See, oops, some of it fell out. There's more. It won't fit in an envelope. The whole story just doesn't make sense.
In your closing arguments, you actually brought in a doorbell. Why? What was the point?
I wanted the jurors to have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder.
An ordinary moment.
In an ordinary moment. The second reason why I did it is because James Sullivan liked to read books. And one of his favorite authors wrote a book called For Whom the Bell Tolls.
I'm going to ask you through your verdict of guilty to each and every count to tell James Vincent Sullivan for whom the bell tolls. Tell him that it tolls for thee. For you. For you.
And then I rang the doorbell 3 times.
As the jury goes out to deliberate, I think there's a real fear. Are they going to do it this time, or is it going to be like every other time?
I do not see this as a slam dunk for the state.
There's this anxiety. You're worried, but you're hopeful. I don't care who you talk to that does this kind of work as a litigator. They will tell you, oh, I can look at the jurors and I probably can tell you what they're going to do. No, you don't. You don't.
This is breaking news.
We do have breaking news at this hour. The jury having reached a verdict in the trial of Jim Sullivan.
The jury came back within a few hours on the same day.
It was so silent, and the tension was just palpable.
There's this anxiety. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And you're worried, but you're hopeful.
It's hard not to think of Lita's family, her parents especially, after so many fits and starts to win justice for their firstborn child. It comes down to this moment.
The judge says,
"Ma'am, would you publish the verdict?"
And then from that moment until they get finished, nobody is breathing.
Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, James Vincent Sullivan, guilty of malice murder.
I got a chance to hug Emory McClinton. I had never been hugged so tight before. This was his baby. And we had finally, after 19 years, brought that man a sense of satisfaction. I'll never forget it. The conviction of James Sullivan was the biggest puzzle that I had solved in my career. And it is one that gave me the most satisfaction that I had ever experienced as a prosecutor.
The court hears victim impact statements. What a loss it was to have Lita gone from their lives.
I dream of Lita often. She is smiling and walking in my direction, and I in hers. But we never reach each other.
The jury came back and gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I am so very pleased, and I'm happy. What we were waiting for was something in our judicial system, something to happen and to bring it all together, and that's what you see today.
Why did it take 20 years, do you think?
It goes back to the resources.
He had privilege?
White privilege, completely. He knew how to manipulate people, and he had the resources to do that.
You've got a black victim, you've got a white defendant. Did race hover in this courtroom over this case at all?
I think in our criminal justice system, unfortunately, race always permeates throughout a case. But I'm thankful to say the evidence in the case overcame that racial component.
They never received any money. Is there money? Where is this money?
He's been able to secret his money. For the McClintons, seeing him rot in a prison in South Georgia brings them a whole lot more satisfaction.
This is a woman who you never met, I've never met, most of the people involved in this case never met her, and yet her life really made an impact. When somebody dies in this kind of manner, they don't stop being a member of the family, they don't stop being a member of the community, they never stop mattering.
When they killed Gary, they killed Gary.
I still can see it when I close my eyes.
This windshield pops off the car and goes how many feet?
400 feet. I'm the killer. I got my gym bag, which fits in the country club scenario. Open the door, put it down, close the door. I walk away.
It is one of the most notorious murders in Tucson history.
He was a wonderful father. He was a true gentleman and a true kind person.
They rub shoulders with people in high society.
Everybody thought car bombing has to be a mob hit. Very spectacular. We're sending a message.
Turns out, according to some, who didn't want him dead. A long list of persons of interest, an ex-girlfriend, an ex-wife, ex-business associates.
It was pure obsession. His hatred was pure obsession.
And we're going to reenact the bombing.
Everybody's under.
To see how it could have been done.
2, 1.
Now we're starting to pick up some heavy components.
That you can take what seems like a scene of classic chaos and create any kind of order out of it is remarkable to us. So what specifically did you find as you looked at all that evidence?
And it was titled To Kill. And right at the top of the list was Gary Treno. All of a sudden there was this thunderous boom.
I heard this huge bang, and I rushed over there, tried to see if there's something I could do.
Okay, what's going on there? Okay, there's some kind of an explosion in the country club parking lot. I'm not sure. We have one of the victims has no pulse. They've begun CPR. I guess it's a massive fire. It was some kind of an explosion.
The building shook. I'd never felt anything like that. I immediately turned. I went out to the parking lot, and there was a car on fire, split open like a sardine can.
I found a man still sitting in his seat, no pulse, pale, blood's gone out of him, just white.
Dr. Sam Buttman had come up alongside the car towards me. He looked at me and he said, "Damn, he's dead."
Ken Halligan knew who the dead man behind the wheel of the destroyed car was. He was a longtime member of the country club named Gary Triano.
And there's a member, and he was playing with Gary, and he was sitting on the floor next to his locker, and he was just sobbing. They killed Gary, they killed Gary.
But the question was, who killed Gary? And why would they do it in such a spectacular way? The blast had stopped Gary's gold Movado watch at 5:38 p.m. End of the line for a wheeler dealer who was unafraid to gamble on the golf course, or for that matter in the business world. And according to his lawyer, Ron Lehman, a man always ready to bet big on himself.
Gary was a tall person who would command a room when he walked in. Dark hair, always had a nice suntan, always had a smile. He was larger than life.
Starting in the 1980s, this former car salesman, he'd sought to take advantage of the population boom in Tucson by getting into real estate and land development and gaming on a Native American reservation.
One of Gary's most successful projects was Indian gaming. You're talking about a high-volume slot machine operation. Gary's personal take was $1 million a month.
Gary Triano was not shy about spending that mega money on the finer things in life. You know, limos, Learjets, even a yacht.
He loved spending $25,000 a week on wine while he was cruising around the Adriatic Sea with his financing partners.
Let's have a look at some of these. This one you were just telling us is very special to your heart.
Well, this picture is because it was on my birthday, 16 days before he died.
He was very kind and gracious and generous.
That, too, was Gary Triano, a valued role model and mentor for his niece, Melissa Triano. As her uncle and later her employer, he was a figure of warmth and encouragement for her after a childhood full of hardships. What was it like for you, after all the experiences you've gone through, to really get to know this man and to come to respect the way he went through life?
It changed my life. He was the only person that really believed in me and made me feel like I could, be successful with anything.
He'd had 2 children with his wife, Mary. Gary was a devoted father of his son and daughter, and the couple had become a fixture of Tucson society.
Who's on vacation in Europe with their 2 children, and he just announces, I'm leaving you.
Pam was a figure of widespread fascination and could be every bit a life-altering sensation. As much of a merger as a marriage, Gary and Pam were officially power-coupled at a black-tie wedding on a yacht in San Diego. Did you hear that the vows they exchanged included the phrase, for richer or for richer, instead of for richer or poorer?
I think I remember that now that you say that, yeah.
You did hear that?
Yeah.
Gary bought Pam a beautiful diamond ring, which he claimed was worth $250,000. They had twin Jaguars. They had this beautiful home at the base of the Catalina Mountains.
Pam and Gary would have 2 kids of their own, while rubbing shoulders with some powerful peers.
Pam and Gary knew Donald Trump, Marla Maples. Donald and Marla came to a University of Arizona basketball game with Gary and Pam.
He invited Donald Trump out to be his partner at the member guest. And of course, he had to make sure that everybody in the club knew a month before.
So, on that fateful day of November 1st, 1996, Gary Triano was approaching his 53rd birthday with a note of optimism, unaware of the big surprise that awaited him as he stepped off the 18th green. In fact, this invite had gone out to all of Gary's friends, inviting them to a surprise birthday party that was to begin in just a few hours.
Around 4:30, Gary was in the bar with a couple of his buddies at a table. One of the members actually walked up to him and actually said, "Happy birthday." I had no idea it was his birthday.
Gary is walking towards his Lincoln Town car, and he's sliding into the seat, and he sees a blue canvas bag on the passenger seat.
An early birthday gift left in his unlocked car by a friend, perhaps? Gary leans over to unzip the bag and...
The impact of the explosion was incredible. The front windshield flew like 200 feet into the air and landed in the swimming pool.
I'm at home, it's after hours, and I get a call from my sergeant, and basically he says there's been a car explosion at the La Paloma Country Club.
Detective James Gamber was a newly minted detective with the Tucson Sheriff's Department, and he was brand new to homicide. This was his second case.
When he arrived on scene, you could see the victim vehicle. It blew the car doors open, tore the roof off the car. Gary's body is still in the driver's seat.
When Melissa Triano heard there had been some sort of incident with Gary, she immediately rushes over to the country club. So what do you remember feeling as you were running towards the car?
Just panic, just shock. I didn't think it was real. The whole top of the car was gone. I still can see it when I close my eyes.
Immediately, cops were asking who could have wanted to kill Gary in such a spectacular fashion. They would quickly learn a lot of people.
Was it to send the message, don't ever mess with us?
So in the movie Casino, Robert De Niro's character, closely based on the real-life mobster Frank Lefty Rosenthal, climbs into his 1983 Eldorado, turns on the ignition, and is engulfed in a fireball.
A bombing sort of has mafia written all over it. Who would want to detonate a bomb at a posh country club in broad daylight with, over 100 witnesses watching?
Arizona has a past with the mob. In the mid-70s, newspaper reporter Don Bowles, he was investigating organized crime, getting national attention, covered by Walter Cronkite.
Don Bowles is a 47-year-old investigative reporter for the Arizona Republic. He's been working on a series about the mafia.
And when Bowles returned to his car, a remote-control bomb exploded under the driver's seat.
Bowles uttered the word mafia as he lay dying, but police were never able to pin his death on organized crime. Strictly speaking, what killed Gary Triano was not a car bomb. It was a pipe bomb on the passenger seat, detonated by remote control. And as Detective James Gamber began looking into Gary's murder, the mob was top of mind.
Everybody thought car bombing has to be a mob hit. Very spectacular. We're sending a message. Don't ever mess with us.
Somebody sent a message, and you don't know if they're coming for you next or if it's the whole family. I didn't know if he was involved with something that might want to hurt us all. You were on guard all the time.
But why would the mob or anyone else have it in for Gary Triano? Well, maybe because by the time he was leaving that country club on the first day of November 1996, he was no longer the high-flying millionaire everyone thought he was. In fact, Gary was flat broke.
He owed $4.5 million to 4 casinos in Las Vegas that were supposedly had mob ties.
Gary had owned chunks of undeveloped real estate. He'd invested in a radio station, even financed this misbegotten movie, The Mafu Cage, starring Lee Grant, Carol Kane, Will Geer, and an orangutan.
Isn't he too big for her to handle? No, really not.
Normally, yes, perhaps, but he's very gentle.
Did you ever see your uncle's movie?
Oh my gosh, yes. In fact, I had a horse once and I named it Mafu. And we joke about it still because that movie was just horrible. It was horrible.
But it wasn't movies like that or real estate that was making Gary rich. It was Native American gambling. He was making millions until he wasn't.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs threw him out of the administration of that contract. Gary personally lost $1 million approximately in monthly income.
So suddenly now he's at a zero income, but his expenses and his lifestyle, continued.
These things were happening during the real estate recession, so things hit the fan at once.
Investigators set their sights on Gary Triano's financial dealings because he owed large sums of money to a lot of people.
There were any number of suspects that the Sheriff's Department was looking at. There were Chinese investors, there were Mexican investors, there were mafia investors, all of whom Gary purportedly owed money to.
It was a house of cards that was crumbling fast. He was promising investors, collateral on property that he didn't own. He was promising Mexican investors money that he didn't have.
He had that gambler mentality, so he was quite a challenge to manage as a member. I constantly chased him financially. He was very good at tipping, but not very good at paying his bills.
And at one point, Pam got a phone call and picked up the phone and heard on the other line a threat from one of the investors saying, we don't get paid, we're gonna kill you. Gary became extremely paranoid, and he starts to sleep with a loaded gun in his bed.
By the 90s, Gary was on the hook for $27 million. He'd run out of time, he'd run out of ideas, and declared bankruptcy.
When Gary ran out of money, his marriage started to disintegrate.
Pam had sort of had enough. She had married this man who was worth millions, and now he wasn't.
So Pam's done, and she files for divorce, and she flees, and she heads off to Aspen with her children.
A bitter divorce and financial ruin left Gary scrambling to stay afloat.
Things were so bad in Gary's life that he went from living in the nicest houses wherever he was around the world to sleeping on a friend's couch.
One of Gary Triano's friends from high school met with Gary Triano the day before he died. Gary was trying to get him and his father to give him a $50,000 loan. His friend described him as anxious and desperate. That loan never happened, and tomorrow never came.
That summit to plummet journey meant it wasn't even his Lincoln Town car that Gary had driven to La Paloma that day. He'd borrowed it from a friend to keep up appearances. And before Gary was even buried, Detective Gamber already had a long list of persons of interest.
We monitor the funeral, as morbid as that may sound. Who shows up, who didn't show up, who wasn't appropriate, who was appropriate. It was a good way to see who should we go talk to.
And Gamber noticed one particularly interesting absence.
Pamela Phillips wasn't at the funeral. She was conspicuously absent. But based on the acrimony and the separation, that didn't really surprise us.
But associates of an eccentric billionaire say he had reasons of his own to want Gary Triano very dead.
He had the capacity and the resources and the henchmen, if you will, to construct the kind of bomb that blew up Gary Triano.
And this doctor claims he saw a kill list written in that man's daily plan.
And it was titled "To Kill," and it was numbered. And right at the top of the list was Gary Triano.
At the Pima County Sheriff's Office, way in the back corner of the impound lot, after 28 years, is Gary Triano's last ride, that 1989 Lincoln Town car. Detective James Gamber showing up close just how devastating that pipe bomb was on that huge mass of Detroit metal.
And this is Gary Triano. This is the car he was driving.
And I know that there's been a lot that's been picked over this, and it's changed over the many years since this crime happened, but you can still see the incredible destruction that took place. This roof is supposed to be flat, essentially, isn't it?
Essentially, right. It should lay right along this line. And you can, if you get a look down here at the frame, you can see where the floorboards have been blown off of the side body panels.
Wow.
Just by the force of that blast downwards.
And the whole arc of this is the result of that bomb also.
Right. Yeah. This, if you looked at this, almost looks like the path of travel of a bullet. Well,
yeah. Technically
it was. It's a projectile, shrapnel.
So everybody knew it was Gary's car. The one thing Gary never did was lock his car.
Lock his car, lock his doors. So I'm the killer.
Right.
I walk up here. I got my duffel bag, my gym bag, which fits in the country club scenario.
Right.
Open the door, put it down, close the door. I walk away.
So finding that killer became Detective Gamber's main goal. There was a monumental list of individuals to go through. but only a few on it were known to have explicit feelings of rage against Gary.
I mean, anytime you have a crime scene this large and this many witnesses, you have to follow every possible lead.
For Detective Jim Gamber, one person with hints of rage was an ex-girlfriend whom he'd broken up with while she was pregnant with his child.
There's a lot of people that talk about how volatile Robin Gardner was.
Robin Gardner was pregnant when Gary left her.
And according to investigators, Robin was so angry, she'd thrown a glass vase at his head.
And this, of course, sent Detective Gamber down another path of like, okay, is this somebody else who might have wanted, Gary dead?
But having met Robin and talked to her, it's like, nah. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen right there. It wasn't going to be, she was going to come back in 6 months and blow his car up.
Even though she was angry at Gary, it was sort of a anger that had dissipated. There wasn't really a reason to investigate her further.
There were a lot of rumors going around about threats that Gary may have received. A lot of the early focus was on people that invested, and then Gary lost the money.
There was no shortage of them to check out. When Gary went bust in May of '94, he left $27 million worth of creditors holding the bag, and that was including those Mexican and Chinese investors. Investigators were able to clear all of them. But there was a man who not only got stiffed by Gary Triano, he got humiliated by Gary too, a Tucson trustafarian named Neil McNeese.
Neil McNeese was, by all accounts, a billionaire by inheritance. He was sort of a trust fund baby, if I could use that term, and he had a lot of money. His own Learjet, I think it was, traveled a lot.
He even had his own personal doctor, Lawrence D'Antonio, accompanying him on his travels.
My job was to keep him alive. He was a terrible drug addict and an alcoholic.
He became acquainted with Gary Triano. They probably frequented the same clubs or things of that nature. And Neil McNeese was somebody who had a lot of money to invest or spend on people.
According to investigators, Gary Triano had approached Neil for $80 grand to invest in him immediately. But McNeese wanted collateral for his $80,000 loan, and newly divorced Gary had just the answer.
So Gary Triano gave Neil McNeese Pam Phillips's supposed diamond ring that Gary represented was worth $250,000.
About 5 days later, he goes to his jeweler who tells him, "You're the proud owner of a ring worth about $7,000. It's a cubic zirconium." And Neil went crazy. Went crazy in the jeweler shop, went absolutely crazy.
And so Neil McNeese did not want to be taken as a fool. And so it was said that he had put Gary on a kill list.
It was titled "To Kill." Right at the top of the list, the day I originally saw it, was Gary Triano. And he never stopped saying, "I'm going to kill Gary Triano," from that day.
And his former associates allege, along with his vast wealth, McNeese also knew the right people, people that had the capacity to make a bomb.
The moment I heard on the newscast on my car radio that the victim was Gary Triano, I absolutely believed 100% that he was assassinated by Neil McNeese.
What we could find out about Neil McNeese is that he was a lot of loudmouth, but very little follow through. Nothing to connect McNeese to a device. And if he killed Gary, that didn't get him his money back. And he wasn't so financially hit that, he was down to his last dime. So did he do it? Again, not a strong connection.
So little hard evidence pointing to anyone for Detective Gamber. But then, out of the clear blue, Pima County receives a call from an out-of-state detective about an abandoned minivan some 500 miles away in California. It's crammed with stuff that has a name on it. That name is Gary Triano. But why? 800 miles away from the Tucson, Arizona desert, atop the snowy mountains of Colorado. Two cases are about to collide, and there's a tantalizing new lead about to emerge, thanks to a fraud investigation by Aspen detective James Crowley into a local named Ron Young.
What I was hearing was he had a great, line to get into your business. He was going to do all these great things for you. I'm so awesome, and I'm going to make you a ton of money.
Ron Young was someone who was, even for the mid-90s, fairly adept at computers and establishing an online presence even back then.
He comes to the attention of Detective Crowley after two local businessmen allege that Ron has stolen more than $100,000, and they both want to press charges.
If Ron became your business manager, he would instantly want all the books, access to all the financials, which gave him an opportunity to transfer money out of your bank account to his own bank account, get credit cards issued in his name on your account.
So Crowley gets search and arrest warrants and sets out to pay Ron Young a visit at his place on Snow Bunny Lane.
So this is Snow Bunny Lane, where Ron Young lived at one point. On the corner where the carport was Ron's house. So we get there and he's gone. He's nowhere to be found.
Ron Young is 6'6", maybe 300 pounds. But where is he gone? 6 months later, Detective Crowley gets a call from the cops in Yorba Linda, California.
What happened was that police in California find an abandoned van, and it's a rental van out of Aspen.
Authorities discovered that the abandoned Dodge Caravan was rented by Ron Young. It was parked outside his parents' house.
And it's an unlocked van. And so when police do come and they open the van, they discover some very unusual things inside.
And as Detective Crowley learns, more than one of those things has Gary Triano's name on it.
There's divorce documents between Gary Triano and Pam Phillips. There are maps of Tucson. There are lists of names of associates with Gary Triano.
And they discover something else that's sort of unusual. It's a sawed-off shotgun. I mean, fraud suspects, they're not usually violent.
It was Crowley's first encounter with Gary Triano's name, but he recognized the name Pamela Phillips because earlier that year, she had walked into the Aspen Police Department and accused Ron Young of stealing money from her bank accounts.
In investigating Ron, there were 2 fraud cases initially, and then Pamela had come in to report the 3rd fraud case.
Detective Crowley had an outstanding warrant for Ron Young's arrest. So why did his still-at-large fraud suspect appear to be all up in the business of this Gary Triano from Tucson, Arizona? Then came November 1st, 1996, and the morning after.
I was sitting at my desk in the investigations office and reading the paper and saw the headline.
It was the shocking pipe bomb murder of Gary Triano.
And it kind of, when you get an adrenaline dump and you get that kind of metal taste in your mouth, and that's kind of what it was.
And so Detective Crowley calls Pima County Sheriff's Department.
And I said, here's what I have. You might be interested in this.
And when Pima County gets this call from Detective Crowley, laying out the evidence retrieved from the van, especially those documents with Gary Triano's name on them, they finally have the connection they've been waiting for.
So what was an Aspen fraud case now is firmly interwoven with our homicide case.
Detective Crowley also hands over to detectives in Tucson a notebook from the van. Inside that notebook, a handwritten list of names, including Gary Triano's niece, Melissa.
They brought it to me, and in that notebook was Melissa Triano, license plate Missy. My license plate said Missy on a black Corvette, and that was my car. So he had been following me, and it was terrifying.
But now, no one can find where Ron Young is or get any answers he might have. And so the investigation into the identity of Gary's killer, it stalls. for nearly 10 years. Until an expert enters the case who's got decades of experience. And that helps investigators with the identity of Gary's killer from a painstaking reconstruction of the bomb itself.
People think when the explosion occurs, everything goes away. Well, it doesn't.
Here we are in New Mexico, Anthony.
Yes.
A typical land of enchantment landscape around us here, right? Kind of desolation and
mountain desert area.
So a decade after the murder of Gary Triano, the case has gone stone cold. The Sheriff's Department decides to invite one of ATF's top bomb experts, Anthony May, into the investigation, just to see if he could help determine who built that bomb that wound up in Gary's car. Anthony, when I think of blowing stuff up in New Mexico, I think of the movie Oppenheimer, something in Los Alamos, right?
Yeah, a little bit south here, but yes.
You guys gotta hold on, hold on.
So if you go just outside Socorro, New Mexico, you'll find this 40-square-mile field laboratory, and it's called the Energetic Materials Research and Testing Center, EMERTEC for short. It's a research and training division of New Mexico Tech, and it's a place where highly skilled bomb specialists do their work with explosives. So we're blowing something up today, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We're going to reenact a bombing that occurred in 1996 that ended up taking Gary Triano's life.
Today, Anthony May is going to take us inside his field of explosive expertise and show us just how this kind of detective work can help authorities identify a killer. What kind of car is this that we're looking at right here?
It's a Ford Mercury Grand Marquis. It's not the exact vehicle, but it is similar in body style and chassis.
Meliton Flores is a research engineer and assistant director here at EMERTEC. He and his team are the ones who found the car and put together a pipe bomb, all closely resembling Gary Triano's car and what was inside it on the evening of November 1st, 1996.
Will be safely tucked away in the upper bunker. We have a flag that you'll see behind your shoulder there. That flag is currently in the down position, which means that testing is imminent.
The EMERTEC engineers have these high-speed cameras ready to film the explosion at 20,000 frames per second.
Morning, everybody. So today we got a recreation shot of a 1996 bombing in Arizona. It's gonna be a pipe bomb. Once the bomb goes off, we're gonna wait until for Merkel he'll give it the all clear. It's the desert, it's hot, so drink plenty of water. We got snakes, we got scorpions, we got spiders, so watch out for all that.
Tesla. Yeah, hold on. Let me do a quick roll call up here.
Like with the Triano case, the pipe bomb is placed in a blue canvas bag and it's positioned on the passenger seat. The technician spools out the firing fuse. We take cover in a bunker some 2,000 feet away.
Everybody's under cover? All right, we're all good here.
Tesla, your range.
Okay, you ready, Tesla? 2, 1.
Every bomb scene tells a story, and the debris scattered by this bomb is much like the debris that was scattered after the bomb that exploded in Tucson on November 1st, 1996. Debris gathered up by law enforcement that Anthony May would go on to analyze. So after the all clear, we move in for a closer look.
It would be up, most of it is going to be up over that bridge. Well, we're going to walk into the blast scene. Now we're starting to pick up some heavy components, and now we're going to decide, is it from the car? Is it from the bomb? And what I'm seeing is car parts here, the door handle. As I can see already, the roof of the car is over here. Looking at the roof of the car, most of our fragments went straight up.
Does it matter to you that it went straight up?
It'll tell me the orientation of that pipe bomb.
That you can take what seems like a scene of classic chaos and create any kind of order out of it is remarkable to us.
That's the objective. Take a look at what the crime scene is telling you, what the evidence tells you, and then go from there.
It is one of the most notorious murders in Tucson history. Opening statements.
Back in 2005, it was Anthony May taking the fragments of that 1996 bomb that killed Gary Triano and reassembling the device, hoping that the process would offer some leads in a case that had grown cold.
This is actually a picture of when Jim brought the evidence up to me. It's just kind of like a puzzle now. I am trying to match pieces. This is the pieces of the pipe.
So what specifically did you find as you looked at all that evidence?
People think when the explosion occurs, everything goes away. Well, it doesn't. There's 95 to 99% of the device still there. It's in just different configurations. I was able to determine the size. It was about a 17-inch pipe bomb.
So it took Tony May about a month to piece back together all the fragments of the bomb, and he showed us the reproduction he was able to construct. So somehow from all this material, you're able to recreate something that looks very much like what the actual bomb must have been.
Yes.
Is there any indication that Gary Triano would have seen that bag in the seat next to him?
Well, he in fact did see it. There was a witness that said that he saw Gary Triano get in the car and then lean over into the passenger seat, meaning that the bomber was also somewhere close by with the remote control device, and when he saw him lean over the bag, that's when he initiated the device.
And just like any puzzle, once the pieces start to fit together, there's a picture that emerges that would eliminate some suspects and start to bring others into sharper focus.
We had found a piece in the debris here of parts that were soldered together. There were globs of solder.
The globs instantly told you, not somebody who does this on a regular basis.
Doesn't do it on a regular basis. The question to me was, is this a professional hit? Are we dealing with a mafia? From the design, the construction, the soldering, the battery, I don't see that.
Turns out the outdated 6-volt battery used on the bomb was also a clue about the bomber's age.
That indicated to me that we're not dealing with some young individual who has experience with AA batteries or 9-volt batteries.
That it might have been an amateur building their first bomb, and that the choice of battery was suggesting an older suspect, excluded organized crime, and got authorities focusing on the man with the disorganized van, Ron Young.
So the way the device was built fit Ron's profile. So it's just another brick in the wall kind of thing.
And as investigators continued to build that wall, they are intrigued by the enticing link between Ron Young and Gary's ex, Pam Phillips. Were they more than business partners? And will unearthed audio recordings reveal whether Pam was possibly an accomplice in the murder of her ex-husband Gary Triano, or a victim of Ron Young?
I don't even want to talk about it right now.
If I ever found out that you compromised me, you're, a fried duck.
It's a story about sex, lies, and audio tape, and a sensational bombing.
It was something that absolutely shook Tucson to its core. It was horrific, it was violent.
I'm the killer. I got my gym bag, open the door, put it down, close the door, I walk away.
The ex-wife, the business manager, the murder. How do they all fit together?
Pamela Phillips was a socialite, a beautiful blonde bombshell. She was the quintessential trophy wife.
Why would she have been so mad at him?
Nothing went her way through that whole divorce, and she was furious by it.
And so she's on the hunt for her next husband.
She said, I need to find a husband that is worth $20 million or more.
Finding them would be the real problem.
Is it okay to talk?
Yeah.
Copy down what you need to copy in your own code and throw this away.
To this day, I keep calling it the treasure trove of evidence. It was astounding what was there.
If he was a real hitman,
Why is he not threatening her with her life or threatening her family, her kids?
It's a sensational trial, complete with sex, money, and murder.
It's summed up in one word: greed.
Here in Tucson, Arizona, handsome, self-confident land developer Gary Triano was married to Pamela Phillips, herself a charismatic player in Tucson real estate. They were a power couple with expensive tastes and the assets to satisfy them.
It was almost like lifestyles of the rich and famous.
But after the real estate boom went bust, Gary went bankrupt.
Pamela began to realize maybe Gary wasn't all that he was cracked up to be. Like maybe there were little cracks in this armor here. Because Gary started to let her in on some things, like he's indebted to multiple people.
Following their divorce, Glam Pam and their 2 kids moved to Aspen.
I saw Gary as being somewhat downtrodden, somewhat sad. Sad he was losing his family, sad he had lost all his earthly riches.
But ever the optimist, Gary felt confident he'd be on top once again soon. Until November 1st, 1996, when a car bomb blew his comeback and his car to smithereens in a parking lot just like this one. But who or what wanted Gary Triano dead? Despite Pam and Gary's bitter divorce, investigators could see no immediate connection between Pam in Colorado and Gary's pipe bomb murder in Arizona, until cops stumbled across that minivan in California belonging to Ron Young, packed with documents with Gary and Pam's names on them.
It was great because we had no association with Pam and the murder until then. Before we had Pam was in Aspen, the bomb went off in Tucson. How could Pam have pushed the button? Okay, now we have that connection. We have Ron Young bridging that distance for us.
Pima County investigators needed to understand the complex relationship between Pam Phillips and Ron Young. According to friends, that relationship had begun here on Aspen Snow Bunny Lane, where Ron Young lived. Pam was practically his next-door neighbor.
And at the time, Snow Bunny Lane in that area was where kind of working people, doctors, lawyers, normal people in Aspen lived.
It was not Pam Phillips' kind of neighborhood, a long way down from that mansion in Arizona. So she asked her neighbor, Ron Young, to help out on her business idea. It was an astrology website called starbabies.com.
If your baby was born under at a certain time, you could get their zodiac and all that. It was that type of thing that Pam wanted to do and start up a little business like that. And he helped set that up.
A new-in-town ski instructor who'd gotten a side gig as a live-in nanny for Pam's 2 kids, Kevin McDonald says he saw a lot of Ron Young.
He would come over and spend time with Pam and was helping her with the star babies, and then he would have dinners with her. And I could see that there was more than just being the down the street neighbor. After the kids were asleep, Pam didn't want them to see them being intimate or being more than just friends.
Kevin would recall Pam as a good and caring mother to her kids. But according to Pam's friends, starbabies.com and Ron Young were only part of her plan to return to the top of the mountain here in ski country.
Pam was always out in the different private bars and private clubs in Aspen trying to meet rich men. And because she said, I need to find a husband that is worth $20 million or more.
If it was Pam's long-term goal, It was fueled by her short-term needs. She was running out of money. And for that, she blamed Gary Triano.
Why would she have been so mad at him?
Nothing went her way through that whole divorce, and she was furious by it. And she wanted money. She needed money to continue her lifestyle.
Once Pam and Gary had cruised on luxury yachts and private planes. Now, Pam was steamed that Gary was making her pay to fly the kids back to Aspen after his visit with them.
Pam told me one night after I put the kids to bed, she just said that she was down to her last $60,000. So I knew that she was worried. She was bleeding money. She wasn't making any money.
Pam was convinced that Gary was hiding assets, so allegedly she asked Ron Young to find them.
Pam's chief complaint during this entire relationship is she's not receiving enough child support from Gary, and he must be hiding assets. But Ron is still really pissed off that he's not being paid for his services.
Because of their business relationship, Ron had access to her accounts, and he allegedly started taking out money for himself. That's what led Pam to report Ron's alleged fraud in the first place. Yet it wasn't long after that Ron Young skipped town and vanished. He was one step ahead of an Aspen arrest warrant.
After Pam came in the initial time, and I asked her to provide follow-up documentation, she never came back.
Ron Young is nowhere to be found, but Pima County sheriffs decide to talk with Pam.
And then when you go to interview Pam, she minimizes Ron Young. Oh, he was not involved in my life. He gave me a little financial advice and things like that.
Yet less than a year later, Pam is out of Snow Bunny Lane and into a $1 million home. Why were authorities so interested in her change of fortune?
Pam had 2 million reasons to kill Gary.
Pothole number 3. Allegedly, that's how the twice-divorced Pam Phillips referred to Ron Young, her sometime lover, neighbor, and business associate, in a note she wrote to her aunt.
Ron was not her type. She was used to handsome, charismatic, wealthy men, and Ron was nothing like that.
When Pam moved up to Aspen, she purported not to have any money and was in financial hard times.
There was, however, a $2 million life insurance policy on Gary Triano's life, set up to take care of his 2 kids with Pam.
They were the beneficiaries, with the proviso that if they were under the age of 18, then Pam was the one that would receive the money and appropriately apply it to the children's lives.
Now, even with a friend's assistance, Pam's financial straits were affecting her ability to pay for that policy.
And then we find out that when Pam learned of Gary's death, she was actually almost 30 days in arrear on her premium payment.
Pamela Phillips became hysterical. Not hysterical over Gary's death, but hysterical over the fact that the premium had not been paid for the month of November.
And they rushed a FedEx payment to the insurance company that got there too late. The insurance company, though, honored it anyway.
And 15 days later, Pamela makes a claim on Gary's life.
So it took until January of 1997 before the insurance company paid. Pam got a little over $2 million.
Pam Phillips wastes no time. As soon as she gets this $2 million life insurance proceeds, she goes out and she buys her dream mansion. And it's this home in Meadowood. It has its own ski lift. It's buttressed against the mountains. It's got these like massive wooden doors. It has marble all over the floor.
Weird name, weird things that they said.
So by 2005, this case had really become a cold case.
So we had this one anomaly, Ron Young. And it was, where's Ron Young? Where's Ron Young? Aspen PD had the arrest warrant, so he could be arrested anywhere within U.S. jurisdiction, and just nothing was coming of it. He was like a puff of smoke.
In hopes of teasing Ron Young out of hiding, Detective Gamber uses his network of undercover agents and investigators to approach the TV show America's Most Wanted.
The manhunt for November 19th is now in progress.
Then in 2005, a segment on Ron Young goes on the air.
Could this accused con man also be a cold-blooded killer? Well, cops in Arizona want to find that out.
Right after the America's Most Wanted episode airs, it happens to catch the eye of a chiropractor in Florida whose patient is none other than Ron Young.
So this chiropractor out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, informs America's Most Wanted that not only is his patient Ron Young, but Ron has a scheduled appointment the very next day.
And that's a huge break in the case, because now law enforcement, America's Most Wanted, they can all descend on Florida and make the capture.
Sure enough, Ron Young shows up in time for his appointment.
After his appointment, Ron is returning to his car when Broward County's fugitive unit makes the arrest. All of it captured on America's Most Wanted.
Right behind your back. What's your name? Hey, man. I asked you your name.
Ron Young.
Authorities hold Ron Young on fraud and weapons charges because when Ron's apprehended, he's got a loaded Colt .380 semi-automatic gun in his possession. So now, detectives race to Florida to see what Ron Young might have to say about Pamela Phillips and Gary Triano. But when they touch down, they get a big surprise, one that will blow this case wide open.
We walk over to this box, and there's some microcassettes sitting in there. And it's like, anybody have a microcassette recorder? And what was on there is, to this day, I keep calling it the treasure trove of evidence. It was astounding what was there.
I don't even want to talk about it right now.
What I'm saying is if I ever found out that you compromised me for your benefit, it would be really unfortunate for you.
After being featured on the show America's Most Wanted,
Right behind your back.
Ron Young is arrested in Florida.
Hey, man. I asked you your name.
Ron Young.
Crowley, it calls us and says they got him. So they start talking to Ron Young, and Ron says, sure, you can search my apartment. And yeah, you can search the storage locker I have.
He gives them kind of an extraordinary gift. And it's like he's opening up his treasure trove of evidence for law enforcement. And what they discover, is a major break in the case.
Among the physical evidence seized from Ron's properties, detectives find spreadsheets, FedEx receipts, thousands of email printouts, and letters that shockingly reveal Pam and Ron had been in contact the whole time Ron was a fugitive, even after Pam had accused Ron of fraud and minimized their relationship to police. I think the apparent connection between us is best kept at a minimum, she writes. I don't want to appear as too much of a helper, though you know I am. I love you and count on you. Pamela.
So there was obviously more of a relationship than she was letting on.
But then, as far as evidence goes, the coup de grace.
We walk over to this box, and there's some microcassettes sitting in there. And it's like, anybody have a microcassette recorder? And so we pop one of the tapes in, we hit play.
You sent my money yet? My principal.
I am not going to keep sending you more and more money unless I know that you can honor our agreement.
And it's Ron Young's voice and Pam Phillips's voice. We immediately turn the tapes off. We box those up immediately, and those go to the lab to be professionally transferred.
It takes months just for detectives to listen and catalog the dozens of hours of telephone conversations that Ron has secretly recorded. And the contents are stunning.
I'm really happy that your 1.6 was tax-free.
Just say yes. I will take the forward like it's been coming, and I'd like the balance of it as quick as possible. Yes.
Yes, I want it all I want it all. I want it all as soon as possible. We have no disagreement.
You start to listen to the phone calls, and the next thing you hear is, you got your 2, I want my 4. Well, you have a $2 million insurance policy, and you have Ron getting $400 and some odd $1,000 in cash from Pam.
Recovered emails and FedEx receipts detail how, at Ron Young's direction, Pam made regular cash payments to him, choreographed, authorities believe, in a manner to avoid detection.
You start following Ron telling Pam, this is how you hide taking the money from your accounts and sending it as cash to me. And he gives her a detailed process to follow.
He was instructing her to take out certain amounts of money at different locations, use different accounts, don't mail from the same place twice, vary your pattern so no one gets wise.
Is it okay to talk?
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing that shows me having any contact since I left Aspen, or ever really. If you, for any reason, need to keep dates or numbers or anything else, obviously just transpose it into codes.
For investigators, this game of subterfuge and these under-the-radar payments from Pam to Ron is starting to smell like a murder conspiracy.
What he had on his computer was astounding. Pam was paying him on a monthly basis, and he had his own amortization table of the money Pam was paying him with the interest that was due, and it totaled something like $440,000.
Armed with this new evidence, police get a warrant to search Pam's place, the Aspen mansion her slice of the insurance money paid for.
In September of 2006, Pima County Sheriff's Department joined forces with the Aspen Police Department and surround her house, and they knock on the door and they say, we have a search warrant.
Pamela answers the door and they tell her, we have a warrant to search your house, and she said no and closed the door in their face.
Pamela Phillips is completely surprised by this. She tells the police, yeah, my lawyer's on the way, and the detective says, I have a search warrant, so they come in, and the way she describes it is like they're scattering across her marble floors like rats.
While we're executing the search warrant, Pamela decides to leave, and we don't have an arrest warrant for her at that point, so she's free to leave.
She gets into her little Mini Cooper and drives off.
Meanwhile, after pleading guilty to firearms charges, Ron Young is sentenced to 10 months in prison in Florida. After his jail term, he's sent back to Aspen.
He gets extradited to Aspen to face the fraud charges. And it's there that the fraud charges get dismissed. After the charges are dismissed in Aspen, we don't have enough to charge him with the homicide yet. So he is free, but he's on parole from the federal prison.
Ron Young moves to his parents' house in Yorba Linda, California.
So there's all this stuff that's coming together. There's the suspicions about the life insurance policy. And now we've got Ron Young, who's an associate of Pam Phillips, and all these things in the van in California, the names and a notepad of people associated with Gary Triano, maps of Tucson, receipts from a hotel in Tucson near where Gary was living at the time.
After nearly 12 years, the police finally obtained arrest warrants, hoping to bring long-awaited justice in the case of Gary Triano.
We're going to do a simultaneous arrest. We've already put surveillance teams in Aspen, surveillance teams in Yorba Linda. We hit Ron and we arrest him. We go to hit Pam and we do a records check on her, and we find out she flew out of the country to destinations unknown. She was gone.
On Friday, October 17, 2008, cops mount a large-scale operation to simultaneously arrest Ron Young and Pam Phillips for the 1996 murder of her ex, Gary Triano.
We have the arrest warrants. We've already put surveillance teams in Yorba Linda. We've coordinated with local law enforcement. We hit Ron and we arrest him. We extradite him back to Tucson.
But when it comes to arresting Pam, they have a rude awakening.
Pam Phillips, we have every reason to believe, is still living at her house in Aspen. We go to hit Pam and we do a records check on her, and we find out she flew out of the country. She was gone.
Pima County investigators named Young and Triano's former wife, Pamela Phillips, as suspects in the case. They're still looking for Phillips and believe she may be out of the country.
So we have to put out a notice with Interpol. So now the United States Marshals Service and the FBI become involved.
Unbeknownst to police, Pam is in Europe, and she's leaning into the alpine lifestyle in a swanky lakeside town in Switzerland called Lugano.
She has just picked up where she left off. She's recreated her world over there. She's hobnobbing with the elite. She's off hunting again for a rich, eligible bachelor. In fact, has been spotted with several.
While out in Lugano, it's just not Pam's style to keep a low profile. And so, sure enough, a local tipster hears news of Pam's murder indictment and picks up the phone.
I'm sitting at my desk, and I get a call. There's a gentleman who'd like to talk to you. He thinks he knows where Pam is. So everybody's poised to go arrest Pam in Lugano, Switzerland.
But there's a hitch. See, the Swiss government wants a guarantee that the U.S. won't invoke the death penalty. Gamber and his team are able to work out the details.
But when the Swiss police went to arrest her, yeah, she wasn't there.
Ultimately, there's a multinational effort that leads to Pam's arrest in Austria. And while she's sitting in a jail cell in Vienna awaiting extradition, back in the States, Ron Young goes on trial.
The trial itself started in March of 2010. We had been doing pretrial litigation for at least a year and a half leading up to that point.
Some of the challenges that the prosecution faced in Ron's trial was that it was a circumstantial evidence case. They didn't have any direct evidence that linked Ron Young to the bomb.
The prosecution acknowledges no one reported seeing Ron in Tucson on or around November 1st, 1996, nor did he have anything in his possession specifically tying him to Arizona or to Gary Triano on the date of his murder. However, the prosecution does have Anthony May.
My job was to determine what was used and build a reconstruction of the device, and then the device was used to present it in court for his prosecution.
He was able to recreate the entire bomb all the way down to the battery purchased from Radio Shack, the remote-controlled air switch used to operate it, to detonate it, and even down to the duffel bag purchased from Walmart. That was an impressive display in front of the jury, I think.
And the prosecution also had those micro-cassette tapes.
I helped you on something that was, beyond what anybody else in the world would probably do, and I think that deserves some consideration, since you're living off the benefits of it.
The prosecution makes the case that in their conversations, Pam and Ron were talking about the murder of Gary Triano.
I am not going to keep sending you more and more money unless I know that you can honor our agreement.
The prosecution points out to the jury an email that surfaced from Ron to Pam, referring to Gary as an 800-pound monster.
The communication between Ron and Pam was the crux of the case.
The defense countering that Ron was simply extorting money from Pam.
What Ron did was not private. It was blackmail Pam.
Then there was also an out-of-the-blue prison witness with a prosecution-perfect account to tell the jury. Andre Mims, a cellmate of Ron Young's when he was in prison for the 2005 gun charges.
He looked me in my face. He said, Andre, I blew that up in his car.
For the prosecution, Ron Young's one statement to Andre Mims, how he blew Gary Triano up, might as well have been a confession.
But the defense claimed this testimony was made up and immediately called for a mistrial. The motion was denied.
I think we felt confident. I mean, as a prosecutor, even on a strong case, you're always concerned about the potential one outlier juror that could lead to a hung jury.
After 13 hours, the jury reached a verdict.
For the defendant, Ronald Kelly Young, guilty of the offense of first-degree murder.
Ron Young was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
Ron Young is sentenced to life in prison.
We can't tell you how many times we thought we would never see who killed my father.
But for Gary Triano's family, the story is far from over, and justice has not been served yet.
We still need Pam, and there's a long road still with that.
That long road would lead to a fateful night in July 2010. A plane with Pam Phillips on board, making its way from Vienna to an airport in Arizona, where Melissa Triano and Detective Jim Gamber were waiting.
I think her flight came in at midnight, and we stood outside of the airport and watched her come off the plane.
Pam's comment to the U.S. Marshals was, if Gamber's in the airport, I'm not getting off the plane. They walked her out of the jetway, turned her over to me. They got to walk her all the way out to a patrol car.
I wanted her to see our faces and to know that we were never giving up on bringing her to justice.
As Pam prepares to go on trial, her public defender would mount an ambitious murder trial defense.
This will not be a short trial when it starts. Phillips' defense has listed about 100 witnesses.
He's making these threats to embarrass her. He knows that she is in all these newspaper articles.
Could he surprise everyone and get Pam a not guilty verdict? Gary Triano had left his first wife to pursue Pam Phillips. Then, as a Tucson power couple, they lived high on the hog. Now, 17 years after he was killed, Pam Phillips was on trial for Gary's murder.
For anyone who likes a sensational trial, complete with sex, money, and murder, this one was worth the wait. It has it all.
The trial began February 2014. There was a ton of attention and anticipation. All eyes were on Pamela Phillips.
I think it was probably the biggest case we've ever had.
The Aspen socialite on trial for killing her ex-husband with a car bomb. Pamela Phillips maintains her innocence, but prosecutors say they can prove she's a killer.
For the Triano family, this case represents the ultimate hope in finally bringing justice for Gary. How was that trial for you and your family?
It was very difficult to sit through when photos or evidence was going to be shown that would be hard. I would get up and walk out.
What made it imperative that you be there then?
It was knowing the truth.
Prosecutors argued that the main reason that Pamela Phillips orchestrated this murder on her ex-husband was the $2 million life insurance policy.
The bulk of our evidence came from Ron Young, the FedEx receipts, the phone calls, the emails that Ron Young had saved.
With records taken from that abandoned minivan in 1996, prosecutors argue how Ron Young closely surveilled Gary Triano's comings and goings, as well as those of Gary Triano's relatives, which included very specific details about Melissa Triano, who took the stand.
The last line has your name on it again, correct?
Yes.
Melissa Triano. Just above your name, what does it say there?
Corvette convertible niece.
The prosecution then brings out a key witness, Laura Chapman, a former friend of Pam's, who recalls a conversation she says she had with Pam before Gary's death.
She said that she should just hire a hitman, have him taken out, and that the insurance policy was a $2 million insurance policy. And she said it would just be really easy to do because he was so predictable, because he played golf every day.
The defense claimed Laura's memory was faulty and that Pam was not desperate for the life insurance money because she'd lapsed on that last premium payment.
If you're going to do a murder for hire for the insurance money, aren't you going to be sure that the insurance policy is in place and has been paid?
But for the prosecution, big piece of the puzzle were those taped phone conversations between Ron and Pam, discussing Ron's alleged $400,000 cut of that life insurance policy, where, in the view of the prosecution, Ron says the quiet part out loud.
Right now, I want to know that we are capping it at 4. I don't want this nebulous thing out there that we're supposedly supposed to.
It's not nebulous.
Listen to me. I am very serious about this.
Well, I tell you, you're going to be very serious when you sit in a women's prison for murder.
Oh yeah, that for the jury was our smoking gun.
But defense attorneys assert Ron and Pam were not talking about the murder of Gary Triano. Instead, he was extorting Pam for money.
I'm terrified of everything.
I know.
I mean, I'm living in total fear.
He's making these threats to embarrass her. He knows that she is in all these newspaper articles as a suspect in her ex-husband's bombing. He wants to threaten her reputation in the Aspen community. If he was a real hitman, why is he not threatening her with her life or threatening her family or kids? That's what happens when you have a cold-blooded killer.
The defense doesn't just try to point out how neither Ron nor Pam could be tied directly to the bomb at the scene of the crime. The defense goes one step further and says the culprit is somebody else entirely. Hot-headed billionaire heir Neil McNeese, out that 80 grand to Triano and enraged by his lies and deceit.
Neil McNeese. He lends Gary $80,000 and gets a ring for collateral. He finds out the ring is only worth $8,000 and he's livid, he's furious. He threatens to kill Gary per Dr. D'Antonio.
Remember, Dr. D'Antonio had come forward after Gary died, claiming that Gary Triano was on Neil McNeese's alleged kill list and that he was responsible for Gary Triano's death.
Lawrence D'Antonio was called to the stand, and this was really the crutch of the defense's argument.
I wouldn't describe Neil as a friend.
I heard Neil say he was going to kill Gary Triano probably 10,000 times. It was pure obsession. His hatred was pure obsession.
The defense argues that McNeese not only had motive, he also had the means, with a woodworker friend named Jerry Capuano, who they claim had a shop and the know-how to make a remote-controlled pipe bomb.
The other things found at Mr. Capuano's shop. You saw that little red thing that was used to put together wires. There was one of those at Capuano's shop. There's an exact one of those in the bomb parts that were found.
It makes for an interesting story. They're saying, oh, look at this. Neil McNeese was the real killer, and Capuano was the person who made the bomb. All of them are deceased, so we're not able to follow up on this.
Authorities continue to assert there's no evidence tying McNeese or Capuano to the murder. The McNeese family issuing a statement in 2014, maintaining their belief in his innocence and relief that justice might prevail.
But I mean, the bottom line is we don't have any question whatsoever that Pam Phillips hired Ron Young to kill Gary.
Pamela Phillips never testified during the entire trial. We got glimpses of her personality, right? During the trial, she would look at the camera, she would smile at the camera, even mouthing the words at one point, "I love you," to the camera during court proceedings.
The camera had always loved Pam right back. Now, after 2 months of testimony, it was time to see what a jury would feel about Pam Phillips as they decided her fate.
The lights flickered in the courtroom. My cousin Heather was sitting in front of me, and she turned and looked, and we just lost it.
We're on verdict watch as jury deliberation continues in the Pamela Phillips murder for hire trial. The Aspen socialite is accused of hiring...
After 26 days of testimony, with 100 witnesses, 670 exhibits, the fate of Pam Phillips lies in the hands of the jury.
Do you find the defendant, Pamela Ann Phillips, guilty of first-degree murder?
Quiet cries of joy and justice. Triano's family says today's verdict has been a long time coming.
Like seconds after the judge said guilty, the lights flickered in the courtroom. It was surreal.
What did that tell you, those lights
That he was there. That he knows.
Gary's family was relieved by all this. The murder was in 1996. Our trial was now 18 years later. I mean, I don't think they wanted it to be Pam, but they knew it was.
Pamela Phillips' attorney maintains his client is not responsible for her ex-husband's death.
The fact that she's going to prison is going to eat away at me the rest of my life.
Pamela Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
After hearing her sentence, the once prominent socialite turns to address a packed courtroom, the only way she could do so without facing questions.
I am innocent. I am innocent. I am innocent. Okay? This is hard. It's so hard for me. It's a nightmare.
She showed no remorse. She actually turned around to the gallery for the first time. At this point, she was just pandering to the camera.
And I don't understand how this can even happen, right?
Never any mention as to the loss of life, but everything came back to the impact it had on her personally.
Outside the courtroom, after losing their father almost 2 decades earlier, Gary's children expressing both gratitude and sadness at the outcome.
We'd like to thank all our friends and everyone who supported us through this entire time. And we're sorry that it had to come to this, because this woman was actually part of our family.
Meanwhile, Pam's accomplice, Ron Young, also spending the rest of his life in prison, and he's exhausted all of his appeals. Pam, however, is still fighting for post-conviction relief based on DNA evidence found back in 2014.
We found DNA on threads of 2 screws that were embedded into the platform, which was wood, for the pipe bomb. When that came in, we were able to exclude Ronald Young.
Pam's appellate attorney maintaining that new, more sophisticated DNA technology will prove that someone other than Ron Young and Pam Phillips murdered Gary Triano.
Well, the next step in the process, we did file our petition for post-conviction relief. I'm hopeful that we can do some genealogical testing if we can find the money to do that.
They get better DNA that come back and tie to Jerry Capuano, then that might get her a chance for a new trial.
Prosecutors stand by the verdict. They continue to say that neither billionaire Neil McNeese nor his friend Jerry Capuano were in any way responsible for Gary's murder.
Where I find fault with this is that they didn't submit Gary Triano as a reference sample. Now, whose DNA do you think is probably all over that scene? How do you buy screws at a hardware store? You don't buy screws that have never been touched by another human being. So finding some lone DNA profile and blast debris doesn't impress me.
If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginning, and never breathe a word about your loss. And that's just how my uncle